We are 30 hours plus into the Trump administration, and we're doing a live stream. I'm joined by Bill Kristol, one of Charen, JVL, Will Saletan. Thank you all out there for joining us. Really appreciate our community, the people who tune into us. We want to do this for you, but also we want to thank you for supporting us, and hopefully we can have more of these as we work through the Trump administration. It's been an eventful 30 hours, and we're here to reflect on eventful is one way to describe it. We're here to reflect on everything and to sort of take stock of where we're at. We'll have a conversation. I just want to have a free flowing conversation. So I'm going to call on folks, but I would just rather everyone just chime in and when they have a good thought. So Mona, I want to start with you. We're 30 hours in. A lot of this we sort of anticipated, but it's still for a lot of people tough to stomach and process. Where are you so far in how this administration has started out? Has it met all of your expectations, as bad as or as good as they may be?
So I haven't been surprised, but I do think some people have been surprised. I think what was it, a couple of weeks ago when JD Vance was saying, well, we're not, of course, going to be pardoning the people who committed real violence. I mean, we're not going to pardon those.
The word
people.
was obviously. We would obviously not do it. Yeah.
And now, of course, it is fine. And every Republican and probably some Democrats will say, well, it was, look at all the criminals in Portland, as the president was just saying a few minutes ago. They will get in line and defend it and justify it. That's the new world we're living in. The people who thought that Trump would be any different have to readjust to the reality that no, as we at the Bulwark said, it is worse, way worse than you thought it could be. And he is an evil person who thrives on chaos and dominance. And, he is just going to press that advantage as far as he can press it. This is his honeymoon. And so he's getting Republicans used to bowing even more than they were used to doing in the past.
What do you mean by honeymoon?
This is the most popular he's ever been.
Right.
And so, and plus he has all of the corporate executives truckling to him now. He has the media, the big tech. He's got the newspaper owners. He's got the billionaires and members of the Democratic Party saying, well, of course we have to find common ground and figure out what we did wrong. And, lots of things he says make sense. And isn't Robert Kennedy right about water fluoridation? and so, that's why I think this is his honeymoon. I'm not saying this is going to last forever, though. I mean, honeymoons don't.
No, they don't. JVL?
So there's a really important lesson for the media here, if they care to learn it, which is that when JD Vance said on January 12th that, of course, it's not going to be anybody who committed violence, he was obviously lying. And anybody who watched that at the time and thought that he was being sincere was naive. And we have now, it has been exposed for me, anytime JD Vance says something, you cannot trust what he says. So anytime he shows up on Kristen Welker's show and says something, why should anybody take anything he has to say? This should just be the return. But sir, you said 8 days before he pardoned everybody that right. It would not be people who are violent. Why should we believe you? Were you lying then, or are you a dupe? But I promise you the media is not going to do that. And
I don't know. Can I make one other quick point about the media, the media, because there's been so much about how to handle him. How do we do this? Can I just make one little small suggestion? Okay. There was a press availability earlier where Trump was being asked questions from the press. He let somebody ask a question, then he did not allow a follow-up because he responded with a string of lies and didn't allow a follow-up. Moves to the next person. Next person asks about a completely different subject, and so he gets away with it. The press should have a pact that if he doesn't let a follow-up question be asked, the other journalist he calls on should ask the damn follow-up question.
I'm going to put a pin in that because I actually have some insight. I
Yeah.
was serving in the White House press corps during the Trump
Okay.
era. But Will, you're shaking your head. I anticipate
Hold on a
Will's
second.
going to
Can I? I'm
yeah.
sorry. Before we go to Will, I just have another. No, this is it's with the JD Vance and the press thing. When we look at how the various people in the media and the owners and the platform oligarchs have aligned themselves with Trump, just game this out. Why wouldn't they have? Because Democrats don't threaten their businesses.
Right.
And if we live in a world where one party is going to say, the rule of law be damned, who cares? I will destroy your business if you don't do what I want. And the other party is like, well, free enterprise, we got to all play by the rules. Then why won't it be like this for forever? And this is now a permanent state of affairs unless something in that dynamic changes. And I know like everybody doesn't like this, like, oh, you can't say that. But
I have a
strike me as, like,
response to
really
that, but I've already
problematic.
talked too much. So other people.
We got the
Wait a minute,
Mona
I'll shut
JVL
up
show.
now.
No, because
Yeah.
I want to go back to JD because I don't know if Will's going to agree with me. I don't know if JD Vance was lying. I think he was totally duped. I think he assumed that Trump would never do something like that. Ridiculous. JVL. Will, what do you think? You've been studying the transcripts all day.
Yeah, no, look. So I want to argue the other side from JVL, that JD Vance was not lying. And yet and the way I'm going to convince JVL is that my theory is more depressing than his theory. With this is the way I was about, Trump and the election lies, right? Like
You have my attention.
It's actually worse if Trump believes that he won the election,
Right?
Despite everything. That's worse. That's my argument about that. But also on the evidence, it's true. JD Vance. It doesn't make sense to me that JD Vance would have lied, or Mike Johnson, or anybody else who indicated that Trump would not pardon the assailants. If they thought Trump was going to undercut them and come out and pardon all of the assailants, they should have laid the groundwork for that, and they did the opposite by saying he's not going to do that. Right? They could have done that. So it's embarrassing to them, I think, that they made these statements. And now they have to walk them back and say, actually, the orange god says otherwise. The oracle has revealed it to me. The way it's more depressing is this is the whole history. Let me come back to what Mona said. Trump is a bad man who does bad things, but he is constantly underestimated in his badness by the people around him who want to believe that, he just wants to, restore America and protect us from the foreign invaders. And so, of course, he's a little off, but he's not going to do anything that obviously vile. He won't pardon the people who literally beat up police officers.
Right.
They really thought he would draw that line. And all of the leaks that came out where, there was some discussion of this, but it was, so my theory, JVL, is this was actually on the table all the way through the swearing in. It went through in the afternoon and was very late that they released the text of that thing. And that it was probably, my theory is, that when Trump found out that Biden had issued his pardons while Trump was speaking, then Trump is obviously furious about that. He said, I think that pushed him a little bit over the edge, and he thought he could get away with it. And in terms of the Republican Party reaction, he's been right.
I don't know. What do you think, JVL? Did he convince you?
Absolutely not. I'm sorry. The reason JD Vance gave the answer he did at the time he did was because that's what he needed to say to make that question go away in the moment. And in that moment, that's what Trump needed. Trump needed this question to go away. Like, we can, you just lie about it until you do the thing, and then you pay the price. You don't pay the price for like 2 weeks leading up to it.
Well, also, it's a torrent of
clear
shit that we have to sort through, and we're going to forget about this in like a week, right?
It was clear to everybody, I believe, that Trump was always going to pardon all of them. He talked this way the entire time. He never made any distinctions. Anyway, this is Bill hasn't said a blessed word.
Yeah, I was going to say, we're talking a lot of process here, but I want to talk about the implications of the pardons itself. They are vast. I know people said it's a virtual pardon for everyone. I haven't actually seen who didn't get pardoned. So I think it's until I see it, I don't really know if it's not just a total pardon. Bill, you've been writing about...
Isn't it that everybody got either pardoned or their sentences
maybe,
were commuted?
Or clemency. Yeah. Right. Exactly.
Okay.
Or commutation sentence. All right. So, Bill, what is the actual implications of this?
Let me say one thing and come back to that good question, which is just listening to that interesting discussion the first few minutes here. I mean, it's going to be a complicated administration to cover for this reason. It's going to be chaotic, lying, bullshit, and everything on the surface, which is the permanent campaign that Trump is good at in his way, the demagoguery, the media losing track of everything after 48 hours. Beneath the surface, on the other hand, and you see this from the executive orders, especially I'd say in immigration, but on some of the government civil service changes and politicization of government and so forth, that's pretty serious stuff. And it's pretty well worked out. The immigration thing is the one I've looked at a little bit. I'm no expert, but I've talked to some people who kind of are, and some of the lawyers. They hate Trump. These are liberal lawyers, pro-immigration people. They are pieces of a jigsaw puzzle that fit together pretty well. And some of it is sort of subtle. They're laying the predicate for things to do later. It's an invasion. There's one thing that has invasion. And if it's invasion, it's ambiguous. It's hard to tell. There's untested constitutional law. But at least plausibly, it allows Trump 6 months from now to claim all kinds of powers that he doesn't claim unless there's not an invasion. So that kind of thing. Even the one that I think everyone assumes, and I assume too, actually will be ultimately thrown out by the courts, birthright citizenship, is there, I think, to be the lost leader, to be the thing that, okay, the Roberts Court gets to throw out one thing that everyone sort of agrees is probably doesn't go anywhere. And meanwhile, everything else chugs along beneath the surface, and very radical change in our immigration policy. I mean, you're talking changes that haven't been in place for 50, 60 years. So, and some of the same is very true of civil service, the Schedule F stuff. So, I mean, it's a weird moment when you have Russ Vought and Stephen Miller, who are not stupid and have been in government and are, lawyers who kind of know how to do this stuff. And a lot of deputies from the Heritage Foundation and elsewhere, Federal Society, working for them, really doing serious things and pulling levers. Look at the Justice Department. They moved 15 senior people over. I mean, they had the names, right? That didn't just come in. That's not just, Trump's, saw one quote somewhere. That can happen too, and get rid of this guy. So I'm alarmed in the sense that it's going to be hard. You have to sort of keep up with Trump. You have to cover all that sort of stuff. The rhetoric's important in its own right. And then there's all this stuff happening, which is going to be harder to keep track of, except for experts. Same with the pardons, incidentally. It's terrible for all the reasons I've tried to lay out a little, and Will lay it out, and most of us have all discussed by now. In terms of the actual, the message it sends, total disrespect for the rule of law. I mean, just really almost nothing like this has been done, I would say, in American history. Almost the only exceptions would be some of the post-Civil War stuff, and then some of what governors mostly did. With the Klan, actually, in the 1870s and 80s in the South, and in the 1920s a little, just, pardoning swaths of vigilantes who were on their side, and therefore setting up a kind of vigilante force for the future. And that, for me, is, again, the real world implication of the pardons is very scary. I mean, the Proud Boys and those guys are true extremists, trying to organize truly domestic terror groups, which are going to be stronger now. They're going to be out recruiting, and they're going to have the sense that if we do something, we beat up some people here at some office, at the civil rights office here in rural Texas or something, with some immigrants, we'll probably get off the hook. Okay. I mean, the real world, it's not just that it's bad for the rule of law, which is a serious thing in the sort of overall sense of Americans' respect for the law and so forth. It actually concretely will give a shot in the arm to extremist groups. It's sort of as if you're dealing with Middle East terror 15 years ago, and they get away with something, and the forces of law and order retreat, it's a huge shot in the arm for the Bin Laden guys, right? And conversely, defeating them and killing them, in this case imprisoning them, it did hurt them. They were not as active over the last 3 years. Why was that? Because 1,000 people got arrested, because some of the leaders were convicted of seditious conspiracy. It's just, again, very much like dealing with terror abroad. Now they're all out, they're free, and they feel stronger than ever. Their recruiting will be stronger than ever. So I think the real world effects in terms of political violence and semi-vigilante efforts and governors and red states using the vigilantes, I'm very worried about that as well.